Let's talk about the chronic baby bust. I've been hearing a lot in the news. I think there were some articles that actually came out this week in the New York Times that talked about the decline in fertility rates and how young couples like me, I'm engaged to a young woman who, and me and her are trying to have a child now. It's not always a straight line to having a child. I think you kind of sold the idea that it is, that you just have sex without a condom and then a baby appears. But lots of young families and lots of my friends who are trying to have kids have gone for a couple of years trying and struggling to conceive. So much so that after doing this podcast, I started telling some of my friends, I actually think it's a good idea to start freezing your eggs, embryos, sperm, because if it is going to get increasingly harder, then there might need to be medical interventions, IVF, etc., for me and my friends, if we want to have families. But the problem is as well, at like 33 years old, if you look at the data, you're not at your peak necessarily in terms of fertility. You're somewhere coming down the slope as a man, but also as a woman. And so you're kind of fighting time a little bit, it feels like.
Yeah, you are.
And I think my partner feels the same way, that we wish we were told a little bit earlier about family planning. And then I hear about these fertility issues that apparently are being caused by toxins and the sort of chemicals in our environment. You have spent a long time thinking, writing, talking about this.
Yes.
I guess the first question is why? Why is a guy that's known for managing billions and billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, talking about fertility and this sort of baby bust?
Well, starting 27 years ago with the foundation, we were committed to start thinking about everything to do with the climate. And you're moving in the right circle then, because the next thing is we started to worry about the cataclysmic decline in insects. I don't know if you're aware of this, but insects appear to have dropped in biomass, the weight of the flying insects, by 50 to 75%.
Really?
In the last 60, 70 years. And E.O. Wilson, the famous Ant-Man, he believed that, nature could handle the loss of humans easily, effortlessly, but it could not handle the loss of insects. That insects are, in a sense, he felt, and his fellow experts, he represented them as thinking the same way, that insects are the bedrock of nature. And if they start to go out of business, then the birds who feed on them and the amphibians, they start to decline, which they have done, also catastrophically. One thing leads to another, and the beetles are no longer recycling the forest floor, and eventually things won't grow, and no one to fertilize the plants, and the damage spreads. And he felt that eventually loss of insects would lead to a more or less complete failure of nature, and we would inherit a planet that was no longer conducive to humans. We noticed that some of the same effects are felt by humans. And a report came out, Shana Swan and Haggai Levine, I think it finished in 2011, and it made the case that sperm count had been dropping, had almost halved since the first reports, academic reports in 1970. So I immediately said, this has the feeling of something that is really important. We got to study the data, and the results came out suggesting that the decline rate was accelerating. The decline rate this year is 2.5% a year. You don't have to be mathematically that literate to realize that a 2.5% decline in your sperm count every year is a disastrous level, a non-sustainable level, right?
How long is that going to take for my sperm to basically not work?
As far as we can tell, our best guess is that in hunter-gatherer days, we had 180 million units per milliliter of sperm. And when the academics came in 1970, it was down to about 100. And today it's 35, okay? Also the quality and the motility, they call it, had also declined, somewhat similarly. It turns out, luckily for us, that we were over-engineered. I like to say like a great Victorian bridge. Nature doesn't take any risks, and you have more than you need. And it appears, again, a good guess is about 45 million units is what you need to be able to get pregnant without any difficulty. And that was hit about 15 to 20 years ago. The number of young couples who needed help 15 or 20 years ago was nil, basically. And for this reason, that none of them had a chronic lack of sperm count in round numbers. And now the World Health says it's about 17%. Okay, 17% of young couples could use some help today, which means that instead of, just trying for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, you're trying for months and months. And everybody knows people now who fall in that category, which is exactly what you would expect if you've gone from 0 to 17%. But this is the killer. Shana Swan and my colleague and I kind of thought about this thing separately and independently, and we worked out, doesn't take a great brain, that in 20 to 25 years, the average young couple will need help. I mean, this is tomorrow. This is not 200 years from now. In 20 to 25 years, the average young couple will need help getting pregnant.
Dr. Swan's projection indicates that if the current rate of decline continues unchecked, the median male sperm count is on track to hit 0 by 2045.
Wow. Yeah. That means the median couple is not going to have children without a lot of help.
It means half the male population will have 0 viable sperm, and the remaining half will be right on the edge of functional infertility.
A few of them will still have plenty, and maybe 10% who are really perfectly in decent condition, because there's a huge distribution range today. There are people today who still have 200 million, better than the hunter-gatherers, but it's...
And what is causing this, and how do we stop it?
Shana would say the environment around you of mainly plastics. Plastics are leaching toxins, and the particles of plastics you have in your brain and in your body, which we now know is quite substantial, are also leaching toxins. And these toxins are what they call endocrine disruptors. They mess with your hormones. You should expect them to lower your fertility. And yet, the people who specialize in fertility problems and write books about it, none of them mention toxicity. They mention the 100 perfectly solid reasons why people are choosing to have fewer children.
Endocrine disrupting chemicals like phthalates, which are found in cosmetics, shampoos, food packaging, etc. They actively lower testosterone production in male fetuses during the first trimester, permanently stunting reproductive capacity before birth.
Yes.
BPAs, which are what they call biphospholates.
Yes, something like that.
Used to make plastics hard, line tin cans and coat thermal store receipts. They are synthetic estrogens. They flood the male body with female hormone signals, crashing sperm count and motility. PFAs, forever chemicals used in non-stick pans, Teflons, waterproof rain jackets, and stain-resistant carpets. They break down in nature, accumulate in human blood, and are directly linked to lower sperm volume. And then the microplastics you talked about, the Trojan horse. One of the shocking things that I read was that it's been discovered that they are physically embedded in human placentas.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Breast milk and human testicles. And there was a major study I think we all heard about in 2024 that found microplastics in 100% of human testicular tissues tested. 100%. And lastly, biological stresses. So me and you being sat down on these chairs heats our testicles to a point where the sperms die. Heated car seats, hot laptops, they actively cook the sperm. And lastly, obesity.
Yes. And of course, smoking you somehow slipped through the net.
Yeah.
But there is a whole other branch, pesticides on your food. Now, if you give me time, I'll tell you about these 2 little studies. They're very small and you might ignore them, except they were done by Harvard and Mass General, which is a candidate for the best hospital in America. And they had a clinic for people having problem getting pregnant, and they ran it out of that. They had 180 men, and they got them to self-report on what they were eating. Were they eating the dirty dozen? Were they eating melons and bananas that have lots of protection? At the end of 6 months, the guys who reported to eat the least bad versus the quarter that at the worst, there was a doubling of sperm count. Can you believe it? At the top category, the more fruit and veggies you ate, the better your sperm count. In the bottom quartile, the more they ate, the worse their sperm count. It was a dramatic result, but 2-to-1 between the top and the bottom. And then 2 years later, they did a very similar study with women who were having trouble. And at the end of their 9 months of self-reporting, the ones who ate the least badly had 68% successful live births, bearing in mind this was a fertility clinic, and the bottom quartile, 38%. So once again, nearly double. I mean, and it's life and death. I mean, these are really important. And this was only based on what they ate, because pesticides are full of these toxins, and they are delivered straight into your body. You eat the damn things. It's not just they're on the surface, you can wash some of that away, but they're impregnated part of the structure of the berry. Berries, apples, pears, peaches, and funnily, spinach are really bad. And at the top end, the bananas and the oranges and the melons are fine. So if you eat these damn things, they're designed to kill our cousins, the insects and the weeds and the funguses. Why would you expect them not to do a terrible job on humans? And we stuff them in our system. And the fetus, it turns out, is 100 to 1,000 times more vulnerable than we are out in the world. For example, if your mother smokes, it's going to do about the same damage as if you smoke for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And you think about what the fetus is plugged into the system and how it's forming everything. It doesn't seem the most unreasonable thing that it would be much more sensitive. And there are people out there fussing quite reasonably about the first 1,000 days of life. But actually, that is nothing like as important as the 270 days in the womb.
Atrazine. Have you heard of atrazine?
Yes, I have.
Atrazine, referred to as the chemical castrator. It is the second most widely used herbicide in the United States, sprayed heavily on things like corn and sugar canes. And there was this crazy study which was peer-reviewed out of UC Berkeley that showed exposure to atrazine at levels below the EPA's considered safe for drinking levels, completely chemically castrated male frogs, turning 10% of them into fully functional females capable of laying eggs. In humans, it is linked to severe drops in sperm motility and testosterone.
And yet, we avoid the topic. We avoid the topic because it's pessimistic. We're not fighting the data.
We just don't want to talk about it.
We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about bear markets. We don't want to talk about bad climate changes, even though it's bludgeoning us. This year could be the worst hot year in history. We are set up because of the accident of the El Nino to have perhaps the worst droughts and the hottest weather ever recorded, starting about now. So brace yourselves. But we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about toxicity. We don't want to talk about running out of resources. We just don't do bad news. But I have never seen anything like this fertility thing, where the data is horrific. The baby bust is measurable. The sperm count is one of the few things you can really measure. Do they really think if you have declining sperm count, the future is great? Do they really think that the economy will function if the number of 20-year-olds entering the market starts to drop like a stone? In Japan, you know what their 20-year-old is? It's 50% of what it was in 1948.
Well, there's
50%, not down 15 or 3.5, 50% less.
50% less 20-year-olds.
20-year-olds that drive the market, that offer themselves for military service.
What do we do about this?
We have two things. We've got to detoxify the world, which is intellectually easy. You ban poisonous chemicals. And we've made, in the EU, pretty good start. My favorite example, and everybody's favorite example, is cosmetics. Cosmetics, you don't actually eat it, but you rub it on your skin, which is the second worst thing to do. And there are 10,000 chemicals in cosmetics. And the EU has banned 1,500. If they ban the right 1,500, that could be 3/4 of the battle, right? Canada's banned 550, and the US has banned 12. I am not kidding you. So The good thing about toxicity is it is regional. If one country, if Denmark or the EU or the UK wants to look after its chemicals, they will live longer and have better health. If the US wants to put their corporations first, they will have shorter lives. Do you know the life expectancy difference between the US and Sweden has gone from 2 years to 6 years in the last 70 years? I wrote in my quarterly letter, my estate would be willing to bet you that in 50 years it'll be 8 or 10.
I don't quite think people in the United States realize the difference in the products they consume here versus other parts of the world. And,
No, absolutely not.
Brits fly over here. And actually, we had my barber, my barber Damon, and he flew over here to give me a haircut last week. He said, oh gosh, I don't feel good. He said, I went and got some food here and I really just don't feel good. And he says, every time I come over here, I don't feel good. And me and my team, we used to fly over here before I moved here for a couple of weeks a year to film this show. And whenever we'd fly back, not only would I be much fatter, but we'd all feel a little bit more like sluggish, is the way I'd describe it, from eating the food here. And it almost felt quite clear that there's like something in the food that our bodies just isn't used to in the UK. And when you look at the toxicity of the United States versus Europe, it's quite clear. I mean, the US currently permits the use of 85 agricultural pesticides that are completely banned in the EU, China, and Brazil. The US sprays over £300 million per year of pesticides that are deemed too dangerous to be legally used in Europe, including that one I said about the frogs called atrazine. Which the EU banned over 2 decades ago. If we look at cosmetics, which you were talking about then, what you put on your skin obviously goes into your bloodstream. And so the EU has banned or heavily restricted over 1,300 chemicals in cosmetics and personal care products due to toxicity and hormone disruption. The US and the FDA has banned 11. In terms of food, the US allows potassium bromate, which is a known carcinogen, cancer-causing, used to make fluffy dough bread, and BHA/BHT, which are preservatives linked to hormone disruption. Both are strictly banned from human consumption in the UK and EU and Canada and China. And lastly, the US allows titanium dioxide used to make candy smell like Skittles, bright white, and synthetic dyes like Red 40, which requires strict warning labels or outright bans in Europe due to DNA damage in neurodevelopmental issues in kids. I'll give you one more. A recent US geological survey found that at least 45% of all US tap water is contaminated with PFAs, those forever chemicals we talked about earlier, the very chemicals directly linked to crashing sperm counts and testicular cancer. The US has historically allowed PFAs levels in drinking water, drastically higher than the EU, the European Union, considers safe.
Let us just say that the EU is forever giving exemptions and extensions and is far from perfect and has a lot of corporate pushback. And it's just much less bad than the US.
And the US has worse life expectancy.
It does. And it's the only rich country in the world where 15 years ago they had the same life expectancy as they have today.
One actionable piece of advice for anyone listening that might find this all quite overwhelming, because lots of things around us, from receipts to the pans we use to rain jackets, contain these chemicals, is there are apps out there where you can scan the chemicals in the foods that you're buying to check if they contain these endocrine disrupting, these hormone disrupting chemicals. I'm not affiliated with any of them, but there's one called Yuka, YUKA, that I know is very easy for sort of everyday scanning of products. You can just scan the barcode and it'll tell you, it'll give it a rating score out of 100. There's EWG's Healthy Living app, which is the scientific gold standard, run by the Environmental Working Group, a major toxic chemical watchdog. You can scan barcodes or search for food, cleaning supplies, or cosmetics. There's Think Dirty as well, which is great for cosmetics, shampoos, and skincare. It exposes the toxic truth hiding in beauty products. And then there's Clear Ya, which is Clear Ya, best for online shopping. It's an app in your web browser, and instead of scanning barcodes in your house, while you're shopping online, so if you add a shampoo or a lotion to your Amazon or Target or Walmart basket, it automatically pops up with an alert telling you about the ingredients list that is within those chemicals. But I think that gives something a little bit actionable and arms you with at least a tool to navigate this crazy environment. And obviously AI is great at this as well. You can take pictures of things and ask it questions.
And what we really need is a kind of green Amazon where everything is guaranteed: food, bedclothes, everything. And that would be very handy indeed. Someone you could trust that would absolutely guarantee the whole line of products that you would order. Not impossible, and I think done well, someone could make money at it.
What advice would you give to your kids on a personal level if they're trying to stay healthy in a toxic world?
Simple advice, and I know you like this, is pregnant women are much more important than anybody else in this field. If you could persuade pregnant women, A, to have no cosmetics, save a lot of money, no cosmetics for 9 months, and then B, invest some of that money from your cosmetics or all of it in buying organic berries if you have to have berries, apples, oranges, peaches, what they call the dirty dozen here. If you did that, I think as much as half of all the trouble disappears. And that's a huge fraction, and it's easily acquired. You know, addressing the 100 things around in your environment, you have to get to that. Typically, if you're lucky, you do one thing after another. You get the gas stove first, which is really noxious, and then you work your way, the black plastics, the Teflon frying pan, you work your way around it. Compared to that, no cosmetics, no bad fruit, or make it organic. That's a piece of cake. That is easy. It will save you huge amount that you will never appreciate because you'll never know how much better your children are than they would have been. But it's not only your children, by the way. For women, you know, you're talking about in particular because of the eggs. Every egg is all there in the womb. And then it goes on to your grandchildren, we thought. At least we could prove 2 generations. And a recent study suggests it might be many more generations than 2. So you get some of these chemicals impregnated in your system, and your children pay the price, and your grandchildren, and perhaps even quite a few generations after that.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.